today's class. We have Truffles second edition class. So we are gonna do 4 different types of truffles today. We are gonna do a couple of different decoration techniques for truffles, and I have sent you a PDF with some information and recipes. So I will ask you to open up your PDFs because all the materials that I have included in PDF. I'm going to be going through it and explaining it more in details. Also, you can make some notes if it's needed. So, yeah, so to follow along, open your PDFs. What else? We will start with the first page of our PDF. It's a short guide on the equipment and ingredients that we need today. So there is not a lot of equipment that we are gonna need for our truffles. Also, ingredients are just things for our recipes, which is also not something very unique and complicated. Truffles are simple on one side because it's basically one type of filling that you can do, and then you can add some crunchy layer around it to give it some extra twist. But I like truffles a lot because it is uninterrupted taste, and they also, in my personal opinion, they look very like tasty, I would say. So they look very eatable. When bonbons, they're glossy and shiny and colorful, and sometimes you can hear like, oh, it's too beautiful to eat. So, and they also can come in different colors, not necessarily something that is very much related to a food or to the filling inside. But when it comes to truffles, it's just a pure chocolate on the outside, maybe with some sprinkles or adding something extra. And they look just tasty and eatable, and there is nothing to distract from this pure classic way of bonbons. On truffles, it's a very classic bonbons. So what are we gonna need? We are gonna need cocoa butter. Cocoa butter, in this case, we are going to be using to add extra to our fillings. And all the ingredients and components of our fillings, I'm gonna talk more detailed about every single one of them to help us to get better understanding why we use that ingredients and not another ingredients. And so it's going to be in the end of our class. So cocoa butter, if you have looked at the recipes, cocoa butter is present in almost, or I think, every single recipe, and it's very important in truffles because cocoa butter provides us with a firm texture. So to make our ganache actually something that we can enrobe in chocolate so it won't be too soft, we need cocoa butter. So cocoa butter, I use the one from Calibor, but it actually can be any brand that you like. And so don't if you cannot find Calibor in your market, just buy whatever is easy for you. It can come in pellets, or it can come as this big bulk of cocoa butter. Both are fine. It won't affect, just the way how it looks won't affect the way how it works in your truffles. Chocolate for enrobing. Today, for enrobing and for fillings, we are going to be using different chocolate. So for enrobing, I will suggest you to go with Calibor or brand of chocolate similar to it. Something Cacao Barry, for instance, is more expensive than Calibor. Calibor, on the other hand, so Calibor is less expensive. It's still a great quality couverture chocolate. It's less expensive because it has a nice taste, but it's not very defined in its taste, and which is good for enrobing, because when we are eating our truffle shell, chocolate shell on the truffle will be thicker than on the bonbons. So we want to feel a taste what's inside our truffle and not what's outside. So that's why I prefer to use some chocolate with neutral taste that won't interfere with what's inside my bonbon. So for enrobing, I will be using Calibor, this one 2915. It's 4-drop fluidity chocolate, and if you will skip to page number 3, there is an application chart for chocolate with a different fluidity level. So how many drops indicates how much cocoa butter is in your chocolate. More drops, it has more cocoa butters in the chocolate. And as we all know, cocoa butter is very liquid when it's melted, and it's very firm once it's set. So chocolate with a higher fluidity, with more cocoa butter in it, will be more liquid when you're melted and you're working with it. So for truffles, actually, I would say 3-drop fluidity will be great, because it will allow you to enrobe them nicely, and it also allow you not to create too thick shell. Chocolate with 1 and 2 drops fluidity will be way too thick for truffles. Chocolate with a 5 drops fluidity will be way too thin for truffles. You just will have to enrobe it for many times to have a shell. So 3 drops, I see on my personal experience, it will be perfect fluidity of the chocolate. 4 drops, like I have today, will also work. So 3-drop fluidity chocolate that I use for enrobing. It can be Calibor 811, it's a dark chocolate. It can be Calibor 823, it's a milk chocolate. It can be Calibor Velvet or W2, it's a white chocolate. And it can be Ruby. Ruby's also has 3 drops. Ruby is actually excellent for enrobing. Of course, it gives fantastic color, natural pink color, which looks amazing. And also, texture of it is very good for enrobing. So I actually enjoyed very much working with it. So I'm using different chocolate today because this is the 4 drops that I'm using for molding my molded bonbons, so I'm just gonna stick to that one. It's the same as 811, it just has a higher cocoa butter content, and therefore there is a different name, and it's a little bit more liquid as 811 might be. But all of this chocolate works. I prefer to enrobe with a dark chocolate. Because dark chocolate is the easiest one to work with, is the most stable, it's the most predictable, it's gonna crystallize faster than any other type of chocolate. It's gonna be a bit thicker when you're working with it, so it's gonna stick on your bonbon a bit better because of cocoa solids content in it. And overall, I really like working with a dark chocolate, and I avoid working with milk or white chocolate for molding or enrobing. So I avoid working with it as much as I can. For me, dark chocolate is the best one for this kind of tasks. But if you want white bonbons, you can use white chocolate, and it's gonna be absolutely fine. Even a dark filling, if you're making like a couple of our fillings today, you're gonna have dark color because of a dark chocolate used inside. But even if you have dark filling and you're gonna enrobe it in white chocolate, just do it a couple of times and it will be white. So don't be afraid that like an old analogy, if you're like having a dark chocolate mousse cake, and if you're pouring white or light colored mirror glaze on it, then cake will be still dark color of a cake will be still visible through a glaze, which doesn't look nice. So with truffle, you won't have the same problem. It's gonna look fine. Chocolate for ganache. For ganache, we're gonna use a couple of different chocolates, and And if I chose those chocolates because on research that I did and on my personal experience, those chocolates actually taste the best, because every single chocolate, especially when we're talking about cacao barry and their couverture chocolates, it has a taste profile. So people at Cacao Barry researched it very deeply and gave us information about what type of products the chocolate will taste best with. So there is certain recommendation. So I was following that recommendation and also relying a little bit on my taste, and that's why I choose those chocolates. But if, for instance, you don't have this one, milk chocolate Papoisie from Cacao Barry. If you don't have this one, use another milk chocolate. Only things that you need to look at that it is 4-drop fluidity chocolate. So it has higher level of cocoa butter, which is very important in our truffles, because if there are going to be not enough of cocoa butter in a ganache, you won't be able to enrobe it, and you won't be able to form a ganache and enrobe it afterwards. But if we are going to use molding method, like we are going to be using for our coconut ganache today, then it's also possible with a softer ganache. You're gonna see all about it. So if you don't have Papoisie, go for another chocolate from Cacao Barry or other producers that will have approximately the same amount of cocoa butter in it. So if you're talking about Cacao Barry, it can be actually Alunga. It's another chocolate that we are going to be using today, also milk one. Or it can be Ghana, Lactese Superiore, different chocolates. Milk chocolate will work here. For dark chocolate, I'm adding a couple of fillings to add extra taste to it and also to add extra texture, because dark chocolate is the richest with a cocoa butter content in it. That's why I try to add it where I can to avoid adding like too much of extra cocoa butter. So dark chocolate, we have Fleur de Cacao here, also 4-drop fluidity. So if you don't have it, look for something else. It can be the other type of dark chocolate, also from Cacao Barry. What else I have? Mexico is also dark chocolate from Cacao Barry, also will work here. Another chocolate that we are using today will be Tanzania. It's actually a 5-drop fluidity chocolate. And this Tanzania also can be used instead of Fleur de Cacao. But what I like about Fleur de Cacao is that it has little bit flourish taste to it, when Tanzania is very, very bitter chocolate. So in dark chocolate, you need to understand that it's going to be bitterness and taste of chocolate. But since we're not adding too much of it to our ganaches, you can easily switch it to different type of dark chocolate. Just try to find something with a 4-drop fluidity, so your cocoa butter content will be in place. So the Fleur de Cacao has 41% of cocoa butter in it, so you can use it as a guidance. You need to find some dark chocolate that will have approximately the same content of cocoa butter. And Tanzania have 45% of cocoa butter in it. But once again, since we're not adding a lot of it to our ganaches, we can do plus minus. So 30, 38, 45, something around that will work just fine. For white chocolate, I'm using this one. It's Zephyr chocolate, also from Cacao Barry. It's 5-drop fluidity chocolate. 5, yeah, I think it's 5. Yes, 5. It is amazing chocolate, honestly, because I'm not a big fan of white chocolate to begin with, and in the ganaches, it has a tendency to be overly sweet, and then it overcomes anything that you're adding in your ganache. It just adds so much sweetness that you cannot feel anything else, except if you're working with very sour products like passion fruit puree, lemon puree, lime puree. those have a chance to compensate the sweetness of white chocolate, but other ones, um, unfortunately not. Though with the time I discovered the Zephyr chocolate, and it has become my absolute favorite. I use only Zephyr for all the white chocolate fillings. It has high content of cocoa butter. Of course, it is sweet, but sweetness is so smooth in this chocolate. So you can even use like strawberries, which are not very intense in their taste, and still use it with Zephyr, and you will be able to taste those strawberries. That's why Zephyr is something that I definitely recommend. But if you don't have Zephyr, look for other couvertures, white chocolate couvertures. Valerona has a great white chocolate couverture. I'm sure some other companies also have it. But I wouldn't suggest to go with a velvet or W2 from Callebaut. They are way too sweet. Yeah, let me put it aside. So it doesn't mean that you need to go and buy all these 5 different types of chocolate just to make those fillings. No, if you're gonna get just one type of white chocolate, one type of milk chocolate, one type of dark chocolate, it will do. If you happen to have all of them, or you are like me, love to buy different chocolate, then of course go for that ones. They, I believe, they will be the best match. But if you don't, it's not a big problem, honestly. What else? Infrared thermometer, standard piece of equipment for tempering chocolate, for measuring temperatures instantly. Mine is the one just from regular hardware store, so nothing special about it. It calls Rolling. I don't think it's some international brand, but just go, if you don't have one, just go to the hardware store and buy one. Next, metal scrapers for chocolate, of course. Come with different shapes and sizes. Yeah, so any metal scraper that you have will do. Immersion blender, I have Bamix. You can use any brand. I prefer Bamix for durability of it, and also that it doesn't have a cup around the blades, so it helps me not to introduce too much bubbles whenever I'm blending my ganache with it. Hair dryer heat gun. I have a heat gun. We are going to be using it for keeping our chocolate warm and bringing it to working temperature. So any type of heat gun, any type of hair dryer will work, just something that produces hot air. Microwave oven I have over there, used as usual for melting our chocolate. Stone tabletop, like I have here, for tempering. Yeah, mostly for tempering our ganaches, tempering our chocolate, tempering our gianduja. Why stone? Because stone has ability to maintain cold temperature for a long time, and by cold I mean your room temperature. So when you're working with the chocolate, your room temperature has to stay below 22 degrees Celsius. Of course, if your room is 30 degrees Celsius, your stone will also be 30 degrees Celsius, which doesn't work. So actually for truffles, you can go a little bit higher in the temperature. So maybe like 23, 24 will work, even maybe 25 will work, because then your chocolate won't be crystallizing that fast, and as it takes time to enroll, it might be not a bad idea for you to have a warmer room. I have 21.3. It's my room temperature, and therefore it's also temperature of my stone. But whenever we are tempering our anything that we need to temper. If we're tempering it on a stone, we need to realize that we need to temper it to 27 degrees. We need to lower temperature to 27 degrees, so our stone has to be colder than 27 degrees Celsius. Plastic bowls and containers, of course, something for mixing, and also have the small ones. I use them for storing ganache, so after ganache is done, it has to set for 12 hours before we can start molding it and enrobing it. For this 12 hours after it's done, I will place it in a plastic container like that. I will cover it with a lid. It is airtight, and I will store it under 18 degrees Celsius. It is pretty important for ganache to be stored for these 12 hours under 18 degrees Celsius, because 18 degrees Celsius is the temperature when your cocoa butter can stabilize completely. All the crystals can stabilize. So because why we're keeping ganache for 12 hours? To stabilize, to allow our cocoa butter inside ganache to crystallize, to stabilize, and make our filling firm. So if I'm storing my ganache for 12 hours, like it's required, but I'm storing it at 23 degrees, let's say, cocoa butter just physically don't have a chance to stabilize completely. So those 12 hours doesn't matter much, because it's just not enough of coldness for it. It needs to go below 18 degrees. So store it for 12 hours once it's done at below 18 degrees. I have a small dedicated room where I have a temperature 17, 18 degrees, where I can store all my ganaches. It can be wine cooler, or if you don't have any of it, it can be a fridge. Of course, fridge is much colder than 18, but it's better than 25. So if you will be storing it in the refrigerator, make sure that your lid is very, very tightly closed. Maybe even put a plastic wrap around it. So refrigerator has high moisture in it, and cocoa butter, as it is fat, has ability to absorb this moisture, absorb odors, and sugars that we have in our ganache also have ability to absorb moisture. So if your ganache is standing in the fridge unprotected, opened or closed with a loose lid, over the 12 hours it will be absorbing moisture and odors from your fridge, and of course your ganache will be ruined, or it will have a strange smell. I'm not saying that your fridge doesn't smell good. I'm saying it's normal for fridge to have a certain smell, and we want our ganache to smell like chocolate and cream and whatever's inside. We don't want to smell like a fridge. So after the 12 hours, it can be absorbing odors, and it also will take in a lot of extra moisture, and you won't be able to see it, but it will affect the shelf life of your ganache, and ganache like that won't last for a long time. And the shelf life for ganaches that we are doing today, if they're done right, is 45 to 60 days easily. Again, if stored under right conditions. If stored at 14, 16 degrees Celsius, it's a storage temperature for your ready truffles. So after 12 hours, you store it at 18 degrees, then you enrobe it, and then you can store it at 14, 16, low moisture, no direct light. It's a perfect condition for storing your truffles. If you don't have, of course, lower temperature storages, longer your shelf life will be, and you can also store your ready truffles in a refrigerator, but also pack them down like really in airtight containers. Make sure that no moisture can come there, and because it will still, even though it's enrobed, it will still absorb the moisture, absorb the odors. So to protect your truffles, just wrap them really tightly, make sure that nothing is coming in, and then you can store your truffles in a fridge easily, and in that case shelf life can be pushed even to 3 months. Yeah. So Next page we have application chart. We already talked about it. And working environment. We just talked about it right now. Okay, and little, yeah, what I haven't mentioned in PDF is that we will need for, I'm going to show two different ways of forming your ganache. One will be with the using mold, another one will be just by hand. So in one case, if you're using mold, I'm going to be using this half a sphere mold. It's 1217 from Chocolate World. Yeah, it's 3 centimeter in diameter, just a regular semisphere, and we are going to be using it for our truffles as well. Okay, I'm gonna start with preparing recipes, and if you have any questions regarding what I just talked about, please go ahead, write in chat, or do it now or do it later, and I'm gonna answer it. If you need to leave before class ends, then just leave your questions in the chat, and I'm gonna answer them, and one day when I'm gonna send you a recording, you're gonna be able to hear my answers. Okay, let's start. I'm gonna start with cherry, marzipan, and amaretto ganache. You have a recipe for almond marzipan. I'm a big fan of marzipan. I love it, and it tastes amazingly in chocolate. It's my opinion. So you have a recipe to make your own marzipan. I use prefabricated. It's easier for me, and also when I calculate my recipe, I can rely, because producer is giving me exact amounts of sugar content, of water content in this marzipan, so I can rely on that information. But if you want to do marzipan yourself, go ahead. It can be a lot of fun. So we have, for this recipe, we have cherry puree. I have it here. And of course, important thing is that you have recipes for 1 kilo of ganache. Each ganache has 1 kilo, so it's a lot. I'm going to be making 200 grams. 200 grams will be enough for about 18-20 truffles. So quite a lot, depends on your needs, but 200 grams, on my experience, it's a minimal amount that you can easily process with your immersion blender and get very good shelf life. Yes. So here I have cherry puree. I already mixed it with the sugars. For sugars we have here glucose, syrup or atomized. I'm gonna talk more detailed about sugars later on, so we're gonna understand everything about them. Inverted sugar, dextrose, sorbitol. I mixed it all with the cherry puree and put it in a saucepan and start warming it up. I also need to add marzipan. Here is a small piece of marzipan that I have, but right now it's pretty hard, so I need to soften it just a little bit. And for that I'm gonna just put it in a microwave for 10 seconds and it's gonna soften it. For cherry, I use Marella cherry. It's a sour cherry. I use prefabricated fruit purees. It's easier for me, and on my experience, prefabricated fruit purees have the most taste. compared to what I can buy as a fresh fruits. At least in a season. I mean, now summer is over, so supply of fresh fruits is limited, or they've been imported from faraway places, so they don't have a lot of flavor in them. That's why I use prefabricated ones. But of course, when it comes to, for instance, lemon, lemon puree, I also use a prefabricated one. But you can just take a lemon, squeeze the juice, and lemon puree is basically lemon juice. So it's very easy. So my marzipan has softened a little bit, and I'm gonna add it directly to my cherry and sugar mixture. I'm adding marzipan at this point because I want it to warm up, to incorporate with the cherry puree, and also to open its taste in the cherries. So we're gonna have this nice symphony of cherry and marzipan. For chocolate, I'm using here Papuasie milk chocolate, I'm using Tanzania dark chocolate, and I'm using cocoa butter. I have them all here. I'm gonna pour once my cherry mixture is starting to boil. I'm gonna pour it over chocolates and cocoa butter, and then we are gonna process our mixture with immersion blender and add alcohol. For alcohol, I have amaretto here. This is what I'm using. I'm gonna warm it also in a microwave, just a slight bit, to help it to uniform with the rest of the mixture. Why I'm adding liquor in the end, I'm gonna be adding it when my ganache is lower than 40 degrees Celsius. I'm doing it because I don't want to actual alcohol inside amaretto to evaporate. I want to keep this alcohol content. That's why I'm adding it on a low temperatures. Because if I'm gonna add alcohol in my mixture right now, when I'm boiling my products, of course it's gonna evaporate. Alcohol and it's gonna evaporate. Which is also, I mean, not a bad thing. It depends what you want. If you want just a taste of a liquor without alcohol content, then you just boil it and your alcohol will disappear. If you want to have actual alcohol, then add it on a low temperatures. So my marzipan, I help my marzipan to melt down completely and to incorporate with my cherry puree. Now I'm just gonna give it a couple of more minutes so it will start boiling. Cherry puree is quite thick puree, so you need to keep an eye on it. It has a tendency of starting to burn in the bottom of your saucepan. You just want just keep an eye on it. So I'm already see it starting to boil, and I'm gonna switch it off. So here is how it looks like. Sour cherries, I love them a lot. There is so many ways how you can use it in a pastry, and even you can use it for sauce for dog and meat. Sour cherry is a fantastic product. It has so much taste in it. And I encountered a strange mystery, so to say, when I just moved in Denmark. I was trying to find a cherry in the supermarkets as a frozen one, but I couldn't find it. And I cannot find it till these days. Luckily, I can buy it as a cherry puree. But it was strange because a couple of traditional dishes here includes sour cherry, and you can find frozen avocado. You can find, of course, frozen strawberries, raspberries, mango, but frozen cherry, no. I was looking for it in many different supermarkets, but I just couldn't find it. Okay, so now I will process it with immersion blender, and it's gonna be a little bit thick right now. Mixture will be thicker and maybe difficult to process because part of our liquid that we need to add is here, and we cannot add it just yet. Okay, I'm gonna measure temperature. 41.2. It's fine. We can already add our liquor. Warming up liquor before adding it just helps it to incorporate with our emulsion batter and continue to process. Right. So good indicators that your ganache has been emulsified properly is to see on a shine of it. When it's emulsified properly, your ganache will look smooth and shiny, glossy. In this case, your ganache won't look absolutely smooth because we have the small particles of marzipan left. It will feel nice when we're going to eat it, but when you're doing it, don't be afraid that something is not processed or anything. It's pretty normal in this case. Remember, we used the spatula to stir our cherry puree, but now we need to use different clean spatula, because spatulas that we use for cherry puree, either we need to clean it completely because it has liquids that hasn't been incorporated with the rest of ganache, so you either need to clean it completely or use a fresh one. Also for your shelf life and to be sure that your ganache will last as long as it should be. If you want to avoid alcohol in this recipe, our liquor has 28% of alcohol in it. It means that rest is counted as a water in our ganache. So what you can change it with? Simply, you can take a cream that has 28-30% fat and use the same amount of cream as we used with liquor. Of course, it won't give the same taste because liquor here contributes in taste. But if you don't want to avoid it, it's the way to do it. Okay, now I'm going to transfer my ganache to a piping bag. And I'm going to show you a couple of different ways how to pre-crystallize your ganache. What is pre-crystallization of ganache or tempering? It's basically the same what we mean when we are tempering chocolate. It's forming crystals in a cocoa butter that has a right form. So there is chocolate in our ganache, there is cocoa butter in our ganache. That's why we want to help our cocoa butter to form this right crystal structure, and for that we need to cool it down as quickly as we can to 27-28 degrees Celsius. So it's not completely the same as we will do if we will be tempering chocolate. Of course, we don't need to raise temperature, we just need to cool our ganache. But the point of doing it the same, just for forming crystals of the right structure. So here I have my ganache in a piping bag, and this method will work only if you're making smaller quality of ganache, like I have here, like 200 grams. So I have a pretty large pastry bag, I have cold table, and I'm just spreading my ganache inside a pastry bag and helping it to cool down quickly and evenly, because I'm spreading it in a thin layer on a cold surface, so it will cool down. This step is very important when it comes to truffles, because ganache for truffles has to be extra stable, so we will be able to form it and to enrobe it successfully. So this step will just help your cocoa butter to obtain right form, right crystal structure, which will then result in your cocoa butter getting exact consistency and performance as we need it to. So it will get firm and it will get more resistant to a temperature change, because when you're rolling your truffles, you're holding them with your hands, and if your ganache is not resistant to temperature changes, there is a big chance that it will start melting in your hands. Well, it will start melting in your hands because temperature of your hands is much higher than a melting temperature of chocolate and cocoa butter, but it will melt just a little bit. Most of it will stay firm. If your ganache hasn't been stabilized properly, then there is a big chance that it will be melting more. So this step, it will be great if you can do it. If you won't temper your ganache, it will be still eatable. You probably will be able to enrobe it anyway, but it will not be as stable, as firm and resistant to temperature change than ganache that you pre-crystallized before using it. (27.8). We need to cool it down to 27 to 28 degrees, something around that. So as you can see, it takes just a couple of minutes, literally, and our ganache is ready. So what I want to do right now, we need to transfer it to a container. If you will be using mold, you can pipe it into your mold right away, and we are gonna do it with a different ganache. If you will be forming your truffles by hand, then you need just to transfer it to a container and let it set for 12 hours. Ganaches that I'm offering you today are as soft as they can get for ganaches, because sometimes there are ganaches that you can just pipe on a baking paper, and then you don't have to form them by hand. They will be kind of ready for enrobing. But we are not, it's not what we are going to be doing today, because ganaches like that has to be made from a dark chocolate, and dark chocolate is very dominant. So that's why I don't have any ganaches that are made just with dark chocolate, because it doesn't give you a lot of possibilities for some creativity with your fillings, and you can't use a lot of tastes. And secondarily, I want to have nice texture in our ganache, and to make a firm, harder shell, and then something a bit softer inside. So here we go. Here's our ganache, and we are covering it with a lid and storing it somewhere at 18 degrees Celsius. I'm just gonna leave it here on the table for now. Just my room temperature, which is 21 so far. So we are gonna take a look at it a bit later to see how it will behave. Yes, this is it. I see a couple of questions, and I'm gonna address them just a little bit later. Next recipe that we have is pineapple and door bloom. Yeah, quite unusual combination, but I really wanted to make some truffles with cheese inside it. I think it is a nice combination, and it also gives some extra twist to it. I also did some molded bonbons with cheese fillings inside. Yeah, work quite nicely, but I think for truffles it's even more interesting, because truffles does look more appetizing to me. So that's why I thought it can be a good idea. So here I'm using their blue cheese. Looks like that. You can use different type of cheese. This cheese with like blue cheese tastes nicely with pineapples. It goes nicely together. You can change it to different type of soft cheese, or if you don't like cheese, just replace it with heavy cream. So cheese has like around 35, I think. I can look more detailed in the recipe, but it has like around 35 fat content, and it also has a water content. So just use a fat cream like 38%, and yeah, just combine it with a pineapple puree when you're boiling your caramel, and this will be pretty much it. Or use just a regular butter instead of this cheese, and your filling will be very creamy and nice. Yeah, but I will suggest you to give it a try with the cheese. It can surprise you, even if you don't feel very enthusiastic about it. Give it a try. It might surprise you positively. It did with me. Okay, so here I have sugar. It is just a sugar, and I'm going to be making caramel out of it, and I'm starting to melt it. Here I have pineapple puree and all the sugars, and I need to bring it to 75-80 degrees Celsius, and you can do it in a separate saucepan, but since I have only one heating element here, I'm gonna do it in a microwave. For pineapple puree, I'm also using prefabricated one. If you don't have it, use fresh pineapple juice, gonna work just fine. Here I have white chocolate zephyr and cocoa butter. As you can see here, I have a bit more because I'm making half of the recipe, half of what you have. Reason for that is that when you're making caramel, it's quite challenging to do small amounts because controlling temperatures and caramelization of your sugar, it's difficult with really small amounts. It has a tendency of burning quite quickly. So that's why I always recommend to do at least 500 grams of a caramel. I know it seems like a lot, so you can try maybe do like 400 grams, but it's my experience and some of my student experience that with really small amounts, it is very, very hard to make a caramel that will be nice and soft. So caramels that we are doing right now, it's actually quite easy. We won't be boiling it too long. We are just gonna cook it for 2 minutes or 110 degrees. Here is type of thermometer that I use for measuring my caramel temperature. So here is a probe, here is a thermometer. Right now I think I'm just gonna boil it for 2 minutes, but if you want to be double sure, just use a probe and measure your temperature while you're cooking. But since it's not a caramel in its pure sense, we are not going to be piping it as a caramel, and so we are still going to be mixing it with a lot of chocolate, a lot of cocoa butter. Texture will be fine anyway. So what you want to do, you don't want to overcook it, definitely. So you just need nice, very soft, liquid caramel, mostly caramel. I decided to use caramel here, mostly to bring more of a pineapple taste, because pineapple is one of those food ingredients that has a tendency to open more taste once it's cooked. So it calls Maillard reaction. It's when you're applying heat treatment to a certain product, it actually molecules give more of a taste. So I didn't want to have a taste of a fresh pineapple here. That's why I decided to make caramel. Yes. So I think I have a quite big heating element here. So I think our sugar is gonna take some time to start melting. So what else do we have in this recipe? Of course we have cheese. And we are gonna add cheese in the end, also at around 40 degrees Celsius. Why? Because cheese, of course, it's a milk fat, and as any other fat, it also has its crystal texture. So it also has a melting point and melting point. So it stays kind of it holds its shape on a room temperature. It doesn't melt on a room temperature, but it will melt on a temperature above 40 degrees Celsius. So I don't want my cheese to completely melt, but I want it to incorporate with my filling. So I need to warm it. That's why I'm gonna add it to 40 degrees Celsius mixture, quite warm mixture. But I still want for my cheese to have its texture and creaminess and to stay as a cheese actually inside my filling. My sugar is melting slowly. Since I have only sugar here, there is no glucose syrup, it's just the sugar. And since I do have just the sugar here, I don't want to start stirring it right now. I'm just helping it by lifting saucepan slowly. So I'm helping it to caramelize evenly. If I'm gonna start stirring with spatula now, crystals of sugar is gonna grow all over my spatula, and I'm gonna have a lot of sugar on my spatula instead of my filling. If you will take glucose from a recipe and instead of adding it to liquids as we did right now, you're gonna add it to sugar. Glucose has anti-crystallization abilities, so if you're gonna add it to your caramel, you will be able to stir without being too much worried that your caramel is gonna stick on your spatula. I'm just gonna move. Yeah. Okay, so when we're adding liquids, we need to make sure that our liquids are hot enough to be incorporated with the caramel. So our caramel is done. And now I'm gonna take it off the heat and add our liquids. So 75-80 degrees, it's a good temperature for our liquids. If it's not necessary to bring your liquids to the boil before you introduce them to caramel, so don't boil the liquids and then cool them down to 75-80. Why I'm telling you not to do this? Because when you're bringing it to boil, of course your mixture is boiling, so it is evaporating some of the liquids. I mean, it's a normal process. And we don't want to evaporate too much, because then we can have a problem that it's going to be simply not enough of liquid for our ganache. So what we want to do, we want to bring it, because there is still some liquid evaporating right now while we are boiling our caramel. So bring it just to 75-80, it's more than enough for our caramel to work. It looks like that right now. Okay. And you are not risking to evaporate too much. Okay. And I will let it boil for 2 minutes, or we can actually measure temperature. So it's been 1 minute now. It's boiling. Caramel can enjoy some stirring while you're cooking it, but not too much, just time to time. So measurements that I did with timing of cooking those 2 minutes, which are almost past now, and temperature is also for this amount of caramel. So if you're going to be cooking less amount of caramel, smaller amount of caramel, then timing and temperature won't work that well, because it's just simply not enough of sugar, not enough of caramel to control those temperatures so well. Okay, it's been 2 minutes. I have 108 degrees, which is fine. This is how it looks right now. I don't want to overcook it. So I'm also looking at the texture of it. Right now texture is very liquid, and this is what I want to keep. And now I'm letting my caramel to set down a little bit. I don't want it above 100 degrees. So just cool it down just a slightly bit to below 100, and start pouring on top of my chocolate and cocoa butter. So if you would like to try this recipe with another type of fruit puree, choose something quite liquid. Pineapple puree is liquid puree. It doesn't have high fiber content in it. So, for instance, in the same amounts, banana puree won't work here, because it's simply not enough of liquid and too much fiber in banana puree to work in these proportions. But orange puree or orange juice will work fine. Passion fruit will work just fine. So anything with a low fiber and high water content can be replaced in this recipe without any big risks that it won't work. My least favorite part of the class is that I have to clean blender every single time. Yeah, but what to do? Of course, when you are you have to clean a blender, of course, every time you move from one filling to another. But if you're making if you're not making 4 recipes in a row, it has a tendency not to be as annoying to wash it all the time. Alright, so wash it, and then of course remember to dry it out, because of course it's going to be still some water left on the surfaces of your immersion blender. So you want to start it and see what, of course you need to put blades on, and then you want to start it and see if there is some water surface, then you want to clean it. Okay, now we can start processing our caramel, but one thing I will add before we'll start processing it is a soy lecithin. I have a dry one, looks like that. You can skip it in this recipe because soy lecithin is just an emulgator, so it will help our ganache to incorporate better and to form a better and stronger emulsion. So I always add soy lecithin in my caramels to have this better texture of them. But here, white chocolate has already soy lecithin in it. So soy lecithin and white chocolate can be enough. So you don't have to add extra if you don't want to. Or if some people are allergic to soy lecithin, it can be other type of lecithin, like sunflower lecithin will work well. Or milk protein will also will also work as emulgator. Okay, let's see what's our temperature is. 37. We can add our cheese, because right now our mixture is quite tough, because our cheese also source of water in the recipe. So right now we are lacking some water, so that's why the texture is a bit too hard. And with the adding of the cheese, it will help. So it is already glossy, and visually it looks like it has been emulsified. So we are gonna stop here. So with this filling, I'm actually, we're gonna do little experiment, and we are not going to pre-crystallize it, we are not going to temper it. And we are going to put it aside with the rest of the fillings, and hopefully it's 34 degrees right now, so it's definitely not 28 or 27. And hopefully in the end of the class we will see difference in how fast your filling is crystallizing, depending on have you temper it or not. So we're just gonna cover it and leave it aside. Next recipe. Next recipe will be Earl Grey, honey and lemon. It is quite delicious on my taste. I think it's a very, very delightful combination, because it's like tea with lemon and honey. Very, very traditional in where I came from. So, so here we have first recipe in here in this truffle is to do Earl Grey infusion. So I have Earl Grey tea here. It's better find oh, excuse me. Better find the tea. Larger tea leaves are this quite a small tea leaves. Larger tea leaves are easier for you to catch them from the infusion. So if you can find something with big tea leaves. If you don't want tea here at all, just exclude it. It won't affect anything. You just don't make infusion. You go just for cream. If you want to use some other tea or anything else for infusion, just do that. For infusion, it can be different type of tea, or it can be herbs and spices. Well, there are a lot of options for that. what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna take sieve and infusion. You need to take quite a bit of cream to make infusion, more than you will need in a recipe, because tea has a tendency to absorb a lot. So in the end, after your infusion is done, you won't have as much as cream as you put in there to begin with. So this is the color of my infusion right now. Infusion can be done in two different ways. Hot method and cold method. I used cold method here. Cold method means that I took a cream, just a regular cream, cold cream, pour it in a saucepan, or it can be any other container, add tea leaves, and amount of tea leaves you can also control yourself, depending on how much of taste you want, depending on the type of tea leaves that you got. So just control it yourself. This amount that I gave you, it's my suggestion. So I added tea leaves, I mix it, I cover it with a plastic wrap, close it tightly, and I kept it in a refrigerator for 12 hours. And after 12 hours, my cream has absorbed a lot of taste and color from the tea leaves, and looks like that, and smells very good. If you don't have time for that, then of course you just put in cream to saucepan, bring it to boil, taking off the heat, add in tea leaves, cover in the same way with a plastic wrap tightly, and set it aside for 1 hour approximately. So in a hot liquid, tea of course will have to open and share its taste more quickly. In a cold environment, it is doing it over a long time, like maybe like 6-8 hours, something like that. So both are possible. Here I have a mixture of lemon, honey, and all the sugars that we are using in this recipe. Lemon puree. Once again, I used the prefabricated, can be replaced with just a regular lemon juice. I'm doing 200 grams from the recipe, so it means that I need to add 40 grams of infused cream. So of course I don't want tea leaves in my... no, that's wrong. So of course I don't want tea leaves in my ganache. That's why I'm just putting it through a strainer to catch whatever it's not necessary. So of course if you're gonna add less tea leaves, it's gonna give you more, it's gonna be thinner, your mixture. Right now tea leaves has absorbed a lot of liquid. If you happen to prepare less infusion in the end that you actually need, it's no problem, just add fresh, regular, uninfused cream, and it's gonna work just fine. Because of course more of infusing component you add, more taste it will give. 40, yes. So more tea you add, more taste it will give. Less you add, of course, less taste it will give. So I have lemon, honey, infused cream, and rest of the sugars here, which is glucose, dextrose, and sorbitol. And it has very, very nice color, and I'm starting to warm it up. I need to bring it to boil. If I infused my cream in a hot method, so it will be already boiled and pasteurized, and my lemon puree is boiled and pasteurized, then I won't have to bring it to boil right now. But my lemon puree is fresh, I haven't boiled it. My cream is fresh, I haven't boiled it, that's why I need to bring it to boil to pasteurize it. Here we have combination of chocolate, it's a milk chocolate Alunga and dark chocolate Fleur de Cacao. As you can see, proportion is that it's more of a milk chocolate and smaller amount of a dark chocolate. Dark chocolate, of course, contributes a lot to our cocoa butter content and makes our ganache more firm, but it's also very dominant in its taste, as I mentioned before, so that's why I added as little dark chocolate as I could. But sometimes adding of a dark chocolate can be surprising. It can be surprisingly good. I told this story many times now. When I was getting ready for writing recipes for previous truffle class, one of the truffle was with banana puree. And I used to make this ganache with banana puree for molded bonbons. I used to make it with milk chocolate. But for truffles, I was kind of forced to add dark chocolate, and result was so amazing. I could never imagine that taste of banana will be strong enough to overcome taste of dark chocolate, but it was actually the case. And right now I'm doing banana ganache. Doesn't matter if it is for truffles or enrobed or molded bonbons, I'm always doing it with a dark chocolate because taste was so unexpectedly nice. And sometimes adding a little bit of dark chocolate can actually help you to bring out more taste from your product. Like in case of sour cherry, dark chocolate actually helps it to stand out a bit more. The same will be with raspberry. Same, dark chocolate will help it to stand out more. In some cases, it can actually even be with passion fruit. It's kind of strange, passion fruit with dark chocolate, but some amount of dark chocolate will help your passion fruit to stand out more. Okay, bring it to boil. It smells really good. Also, we will have, yes, we have, of course, chocolate and cocoa butter here. Also, I have just tiny bit of regular butter here. Butter I'm adding to this recipe to add some extra creaminess to it. And next recipe we're going to be working on is going to be our coconut ganache. Yes, our coconut ganache. Coconut ganache is the most liquid through all today ganaches, but doesn't matter which method of forming ganache you will choose, with a mold or by hand. All of ganaches that we did today can be piped into mold or can be formed by hand. So the fact that I'm going to be showing method with a mold with a coconut ganache doesn't mean that coconut ganache can be used only with that method. No, all of them are firm enough to be formed by hand and soft enough to be piped. Okay, I will wash my immersion blender. I can see that everything is boiling already. Okay. And pouring it on chocolate. Make sure to take everything from your saucepan because we calculate precisely how much liquids we have, so you don't want to leave 20 grams of your liquid inside your saucepan instead of your ganache. We'll give it 1 minute to start melting our chocolate and cocoa butter. And after that, we are going to process it with immersion blender. Of course, immersion blender has to be dried and cleaned every single time before we use it. Yes. Okay. Starting to process with immersion blender, and we will add butter when we're gonna reach around 40 degrees. Okay. Also, larger amounts of ganache when you are mixing it will allow you to avoid getting too much of air bubbles inside your ganache. So, glossy, it means that it worked. And now I'm gonna show you different method how to quickly cool down your ganache. Well, it can be, whenever whatever method is easier for you and you can come up with will be fine. So the only task here is to actually to cool down your ganache to 27-28 degrees Celsius as quickly as it possible. So right now it is it's showing temperature all around. I think it's something maybe, no, it's fine. So it was showing 38 and then 42, so I'm thinking that 38 is the right one. Another way to do it will be just to do it directly on a cold table surface, or I have just a small stone plate which is cold. Of course, every time before, if you're thinking to pour something that has to be stored and consumed on some surface, you need to absolutely make sure that it is clean. So I'm putting sanitizing liquid on it and then making sure that it will evaporate completely and leave just a sanitized, dry, clean surface. And what I'm gonna do afterwards, I'm just gonna pour my ganache here. and let the coldness of a stone cool it down quickly for me, and of course pre-crystallize my cocoa butter. If you don't have a stone plate like that or a stone table, it's also possible just to use like a ceramic bowl or like large container that is has been cooled down in the fridge, for instance, but then make sure that there is no condensed water on the surface, or just in a cold room temperature, and just pour your ganache in this ceramic or glass bowl, because plastic one won't work, because plastic doesn't hold any temperature, and we need something that will hold this cold temperature and transfer it to our ganache. That's why ceramic glass, thick ceramic glass bowl will work just fine. Thermometer 26.9, so it works very, very quickly. And of course now we need the same as we did before. Now we need to transfer it to plastic container. If this ganache you want to be piped, then you need to transfer it to a paste to bake pipe. If you want it hand formed, then you need to transfer it to bowl like that. Yep. So this is another way of cooling it down quickly. And this ganache also goes for 12 hours to 18 degrees or under 18 degrees, as we talked before. And after that it can be formed. I'm just gonna leave it here at the room temperature, so we will be able to compare all our ganaches in the late part of the class. Alright, and now we are moving towards our last recipe. It is coconut. Here I have coconut puree with all the sugars and with cream. Here I have chocolate, zephyr chocolate, and cocoa butter. Why I mentioned that coconut puree has to be prefabricated in this recipe? Well, on my experience, when other fruit purees can be made by yourself easily, like it doesn't take too long to make cherry puree. You just process it with immersion blender, and then depends on if you want to keep a pulp or not. You can either strain it or use it with a pulp. Pineapple puree is very easy. You just process it with immersion blender and catch with a fine strainer fibers, or you can decide to use with the fibers, but better not with. So it is quite easy to do any kind of fruit puree except of coconut. I tried to do coconut puree myself, and I did it twice, and twice it was a disaster. So if you don't have prefabricated coconut puree, I will suggest you to use just coconut cream or coconut milk instead. But take coconut milk, not light one. So with normal or high fat content. And I did this recipe with coconut milk fat coconut milk, and it works just fine. Taste is nice because basically, well, this prefabricated coconut puree, it's a coconut pulp, coconut cream, and sugar. So it just made in a one emulsion by a manufacturer, but yeah, just use coconut milk. But remember that this coconut puree had 13% of inverted sugar in it, so you keep in mind that you probably want to add this 13% of amount of 200 grams will come as a inverted sugar that you will have to add additionally. Okay, bringing our liquids to boil, we will also need the pastry bag. So the coconut, it's a straightforward recipe, just a coconut here, but it tastes very good. It has such a rich coconutty taste, and we are gonna make additional. We're gonna make coconut gianduja, and with the crunch of coconut gianduja, it's gonna be even more interesting. So we brought liquids to boil. Now we poured it over chocolate and cocoa butter. There is nothing else to add in this recipe. It's basically it. And I'm gonna wash my immersion blender as usual. Alrighty. And mixing it. You can process it a bit longer, it won't hurt. It will only make your ganache better, but for a timeline of our class, I'm gonna stop right here. Once I can already see that ganache is quite glossy, as any white chocolate ganache is quite transparent. But it will be more matte when it will have a chance to set. Okay, and now we are going to transfer it to our pastry bag. As you can see, it's quite a liquid ganache. It is quite liquid. And now we are gonna pre-crystallize it. And so I'm just gonna flatten it out in a pastry bag and leave it on a table so it can cool down. Here I have also a stone surface. So I'm just gonna leave it here on a stone surface and let it pre-crystallize, and we meanwhile is gonna start preparing molds. So for that we will have to temper chocolate. You have some information about tempering chocolate in your PDF, different methods. Right now I'm gonna use seeding method for tempering. So here I have bowl with the chocolate. I kept it in my oven at 50 degrees Celsius since our class started, so like for 2 hours. Yeah, I kept it at 45 degrees. My oven has a function of working it as a hot cabinet, so it can maintain these low temperatures, so I don't risk of overheating or melting something. So it is I use it for melting and heating up when I have a lot of time. I mean, I can do it in advance, start heating, but I don't have to do it manually. So if not to heat it in an oven, then just take chocolate, place it in a microwave safe plastic bowl, and in a microwave in 30-second impulses. Start warming it up, stir it after every 30-second impulse, because chocolate has a tendency of starting to burn. Sugar in the chocolate can start burning. So melt it down in 30-second impulses until it will reach necessary temperature. It's 50-55 degrees for dark chocolate and lower temperatures for milk and white chocolate, and you have those temperatures in your PDFs. So to temper in a seeding method, we first melt the chocolate, and then we add approximately 1/3 of the amount we add of room temperature tempered chocolate. And all the chocolate that we buy is tempered for us by a manufacturer. So you just basically take your chocolate from a bag, add it to your melted chocolate, and start stirring actively. So it is approximately 1/3 of amount you need to add. It can vary. It can vary depending on your room temperature, on how hot is your chocolate that you melted. It can be 40, it can be 50, 55 degrees. What is the temperature of a chocolate that you're adding? So it can vary, but approximately 1/3. And we are just stirring it until we will reach its working temperature. And important working temperature for dark chocolate that I'm doing right now is 31-32 degrees Celsius. Working temperatures for other chocolates you can see in your PDF. And the important thing here is to keep adding more of tempered chocolate until you will go below 33.8 degrees. So you need, by adding tempered chocolate, we are adding stable crystals of cocoa butter that are kind of organizing our unstable melted crystals. So 33.8 degrees is a crucial temperature for us. Now it's 33.7. After you pass that line, you don't have to add more. But before, if you added some chocolate, you store it, and at 35 degrees, you already have no unmelted chocolate there, then you need to add more. But add little by little until all of it will be melted. If you added too much, And then keep stirring until you will reach working temperature. If you add it a bit too much, then just it will stop melting when it's gonna reach 31 degrees. So until it will get to 31, just keep stirring, and extra ones will melt. If you cannot melt extra ones, then gently warm up a surface with a heat gun and then mix it one more time. But don't overheat it. Don't go above 33.8. It's very important temperature. So it's ready. I have like tiny pieces here and there, but I won't pay my attention to them, and I won't spend more time on it. Yeah. So it is 4-drop fluidity chocolate, so you can see it's quite liquid. I normally don't use seeding method. Decided to start with it right now because I want to keep my table clean. Normally I don't like seeding, I use seeding when I need to temper just a little bit, or I don't have a space, or my table has to be really clean. But normally seeding is exhausting. You just need to stir and stir and stir, and take a very long time compared to tabling method. So my favorite method is a tabling method. So no matter what, we need to check how successful our tempering was. So I just have a little bit of chocolate here, and I'm applying it on a table. Or second thing you can do, to take knife, fork, whatever you have, apply chocolate. As you can see right now, it's very glossy, and of course it's soft, melted, and place it in the fridge for just a couple of minutes. What I usually do, I usually apply a little bit of chocolate to a cold part of the table, and to see how fast it's gonna show first signs of crystallization. First signs of crystallization is it's starting to get matte. So now it's glossy, and when I will see that it's starting to get matte, you usually can see it best under angle. So when I can see first signs of chocolate getting matte, and it should happen in a matter of 30 seconds. So I can already see that it's starting to get matte. Just make sure to apply a very thin layer and to use colder part of the table. So I can see that it's already crystallizing, and even if I'm gonna touch it here, it almost doesn't leave anything on my fingers, and it happens very quickly. So I can make conclusions that my tempering was indeed successful. And the same should happen to the chocolate that you put in the fridge. In a matter of minutes, it should start getting matte on its surface, which it did. So it's not it's not focusing. It's very odd. Yeah. So it's not shiny. It is right now matte. It won't be firm yet, but you can already touch it. Yeah. So to do our bonbons with a mold, we need to first cast molds. There is a possibility to do bonbons without casting molds. For that you will need mold that has two openings on both sides. It's usually molds that are used for magnetic transfer sheets. So they have opening from both sides. If you will put ganache, like a really firm ganache, in a mold like that, give it a couple of hours to set, and then just gently lift the mold, you will have ganache left on your parchment paper having the same shape as your mold did. And then after that you can give them a chance to crystallize, and you can dip them. But if you want to have a perfect sphere, like I have here, here, we need to cast the mold first. So I'm just gonna do a couple of holes, so I'm pouring chocolate directly from bowl. Now we need to do as usual, as we will be doing when we're doing molded bonbons. We need to tap out bubbles and discharge leftover chocolate, leaving like a 2 mm thick shell. Clean some extra and tap a bit more. Now I'm just gonna put it on a side and leave it here on a table until it will show again first signs of crystallization. It means that my chocolate is gonna start getting matte inside cavities. One more thing that I'm gonna do right now. I'm waiting for my molds to set, and meanwhile I'm gonna do one of future decorating elements that we are gonna use for our truffles. And for that I will still do Okay, well, I will I will have to mess up the table still a little bit. So I have tempered chocolate here. I have table. Sorry, I have a palette knife, so I need to spread my chocolate in a very thin layer. So I'm holding palette knife here on one side with just one finger and spreading chocolate in a thin layer. It has to be pretty thin, so 1 millimeter, maybe even less. More times I will go with my palette knife over the surface of a chocolate, faster it will start setting actually. So we don't need it to look perfect, that's why I just keep going, because we are going to be making cutting small pieces out of it anyway, so we don't need to look perfect, we just need it to crystallize as quickly as possible so we can start forming it. We need knife, just a regular knife, and I'm just starting to make some incisions on the surface to divide my chocolate into smaller sections. Then we need a clean spatula, of course. And chocolate is firm enough, I can touch it. So we are holding spatula with both hands and making this fast movement going underneath our chocolate and rolling it a little bit up. Of course, it can be done from any type of chocolate. If you're gonna use rubies, and you will have this very beautiful pink little swirls, so you will have very nice pink things to decorate with. I'm using dark as my primarily chocolate today for enrobing and for decorating is dark chocolate. Okay, so I will scrape them into bowl and will give them a chance to set just a little bit. Usually all the chocolate decorations, even such as small ones as this one, are best to give them 12 hours to crystallize. Of course, we are not gonna do that right now, so I'm just gonna transfer them to a bowl, give them a chance to crystallize on just a room temperature, and then I'm gonna make them smaller. Because right now, of course, they're way too big for truffles. Yep. Meanwhile, mold that we casted already showing signs of crystallization. You start getting a matte, and I'm gonna transfer it to the fridge for a couple of minutes to help it to obtain right crystal structure. Meanwhile, chocolate here, our tempered chocolate, I want it to remain tempered. So I'm just gonna turn on my... Here I have a melting kettle. I'm gonna turn it on for 30 degrees Celsius, and I'm just gonna put my bowl in there so it will give heat to my chocolate and will keep it warm. So I avoid my chocolate getting my chocolate getting stabilized and crystallized completely. Meanwhile, here's our coconut ganache. We haven't forgot about it. It's just had a good chance to crystallize completely. So now it's cold, but I can still, and you can feel it that it's still, or you can see it, it's still liquid. It's pretty cold. It's 23.7, which is absolutely unnecessary. It just happens to be that I was doing something else, but it's still gonna be pipeable, and it's a beauty of all the white chocolate-based ganaches. Here we go. So best thing will be for your mold to be in a coldness like better wine fridge or 18 degrees, but refrigerator also will work for a short time, just for 20 minutes before you will pipe, 20-30 minutes before you will pipe filling inside. We are gonna do it right away, just not to wait too long. So we are doing as we are going to be doing regularly, just piping ganache inside the cavities. Only difference here, that difference compared to molded chocolates, you can go over, or you can go all the way to the top with the filling. So usually you will leave like 2 millimeters approximately for capping your bonbons. Here it's not needed because we are not going to be capping them. We are going to be merging them together. So that's why you can just leave like 1 millimeter will be enough. Or you can go all the way to the top. And when you're done piping, just like that, you need to leave it for 12 hours once again to let your chocolate crystallize and obtain final crystal structure, and to let your bonbons let your ganache, of course, sorry, to let your ganache to finally crystallize and obtain your right crystal structure. So I made 200 grams of coconut ganache, and I have just a little bit here left. So it was, I filled the whole mold, 12, 17, and I have a little bit left here. Just to understand better how much it is. I'm just gonna leave it at room temperature for now, but we know that we need to put it someplace cold. What's next? What is next? Next, I already did, of course, before the class, I already did this molded bonbons, and when you connect two spheres, they're gonna look like that. And now we are gonna see, and we are gonna see how to connect them. I have, well, it is it is of course pretty simple how to connect them, but I'm gonna of course show it to you. So here I have spheres already filled with coconut ganache. I will do 3 bonbons together with you. I'll leave them here, and for that I will need a hot surface. Hot surface, it can be, I usually actually just take a plate like that and I put it directly on a stove. Yeah. So I usually use that stove. I don't know how it will work with this one, but hey, we can try. Up. So here I already have, as you can see, some of the truffles that I formed prior to the class, and I will need the gloves for the task, and now we are gonna do a couple of them together. Actually, amount of filling will be the same, and the size will be pretty much the same in the ones that we are gonna do in with the mold and the ones that we are gonna form by hand. Size and weight of both will be the same. So here we have two half spheres, and we have a cold plate. Okay, I'm gonna do something different. I'm gonna use another method. So I'm gonna boil a little bit of water, put it in a cup, place plate on a cup, and it will be like bain-marie type of thing. So water is boiling. Let's take 5 minutes as a break. Until water is boiled, and you can have a cup of coffee, and we're gonna meet in 5 minutes. All right. Hope you're all back now. We are starting. So here I have hot water plate on top. So it is usually important for, if you're using bain-marie for any kind of chocolate world, that there is no steam coming out, because chocolate and water don't go together very nicely. So in this case it's not that crucial, but still we have two half spheres. We are melting them just edges, just like that, and we are pressing them together just like that, and take it out on the sides, extra chocolate that will appear on the edges. So we are going to enrobe it in the chocolate in one more layer. So if you have some, like for instance here I have some that has distance in between two spheres, which is not a problem because we are gonna enrobe it in the chocolate. So our coverage, our protective layer over ganache will be full and complete. Another one, just pressing them together. Just make sure that the edges are uniform and standing directly on top of each other, because this method allows us to make absolutely perfect round truffles, which is great. Of course, there is one more way to form a ganache for truffles, is to use truffle shells, already prefabricated ones. So you buy them and they're already lined up in a tray. You pipe a ganache, you close it, or you just wait 12 hours and then you just enrobe it. Also possible. I personally don't use prefabricated shells because I don't like taste of a chocolate in them, and second, they're pretty thick, which I don't like, because you need to still enrobe them in chocolate and then you end up with a shell around your ganache that is pretty thick. So that's why I don't use them. I use ones that I use those two methods primarily. Okay, so this is ready. Here I have parchment paper, as you can see, which is not very important for molded truffles, but it is important for ganache that we are going to be doing by hands. You need to place this ganache as we have here. We're gonna do the small balls from ganache, and you want to put them on a parchment paper. It's the best surface. You put it on the side for a while, and now we are gonna make coconut gianduja, our last recipe for today, and after that we are gonna start enrobing. Coconut gianduja. First is coconut paste. Coconut paste I'm not doing with you today. It takes way too long. So I'm just gonna explain how this recipe is done. So you have recipe, and first ingredients are for syrup: sugar, inverted sugar, water. If you don't have inverted sugar, you can replace it with a glucose syrup here. Mix all the ingredients in a saucepan and bring it to boil, and boil for 2 minutes. For 2 minutes it will approximately give you 110-112 degrees Celsius. Let it cool down. Then take coconut flakes, like these ones, standard ones. Take a large bowl, pour cold or room temperature syrup on coconut flakes, mix it really well. Take a baking tray lined with parchment paper or baking paper, spread coconut with the syrup in a thin layer and put it to oven. 170 degrees Celsius. I have hot air and 170 degrees Celsius. You can, depending on your oven, maybe you want to go less, like 150, 160. And start baking it. Stir it after every 5 minutes, so they will be baked. None of them will get super brown. Your cookies, you don't want them to get brown. You want them to absorb a syrup and to evaporate water that has been left in the syrup and caramelize a little bit. So, but stirring it will help to spread the heat evenly, to maintain a white color of your coconut, and also to evaporate all the water. So keep doing it. It can take, for me it was 15 minutes, so it can take 12 to 15 minutes. It can take more depending on your oven. So they won't get dark. You just need to look when your coconut flakes will look dry again. Once it's done, let them to cool down. Take a food processor or something like that, maybe in a larger version, and start processing your coconut flakes until they will form uniform paste. I did this part in melanger, which was probably a mistake, because food processor is grinding, like cutting into small pieces because it has blades, when melanger is pressing. So coconut flakes has a lot of coconut oil inside, so melanger did press a bit too much of oil inside, and I got in the end like very firm pieces. So actually this is made just from coconut flakes. The recipe that I explained to you, after 24 hours, it's need 24 hours to set, so it formed this piece. Coconut butter, coconut oil, that will also be present if you're gonna use a food processor. You're gonna still gonna give coconut oil. It is also a fat, similar to cocoa butter. Coconut oil or butter has also its own crystal structure, also has a melting temperature. It has a higher melting temperature than cocoa butter, and it also takes much longer for it to set compared to cocoa butter. So after you're done processing it, put it in a container and give it like 24 hours for it to set. So it's gonna look like something like that. If you will press too much oil, if you will end up with like larger uniform pieces like that, you will have to, after it's set, what I did, I took fork, and it's not very tough, so I took a fork and I just separated the smaller pieces and crushed, and ended up with this. So it is actually coconut paste, but because of coconut butter that doesn't melt at room temperature, it looks like a powder. But it smells like it smells and tastes like caramelized coconut. It has a lot of taste in it. Yes, and we are going to be using it for our gianduja. Second thing that we are going to be using it for our coconut gianduja, it's almond paste, but to maintain a light color of gianduja, I used I used almond flakes. So when you're making a paste out of almond that has a skin, it's gonna have dark color because skin of almond is dark brown. But I wanted to have light colors. That's why I used just you can use like peeled almonds, or I used almond flakes, peeled almond flakes. I had them fresh, so I rolled them in the oven for at 160 degrees for around like 10 to 20 minutes. It depends on how much. I had a kilo, so it took me 20 minutes to roast it. Then with the help of melanger, I was grinding it and pressing melanger until almond gave oil, and I ended up with a paste like that. Once again, it's still possible to use a food processor like that to make a paste. It won't be that smooth as you will get from a melanger, but it's definitely possible. You just need to work with smaller quantities if you're using food processor, or you need to have a really strong food processor. I had a KitchenAid food processor, like a larger one, and I was doing my nut paste in it, and engine just burned, so it was too much for it. After that, I got melanger. But it is possible. If you don't have to make kilos, it's not problem. Just even a smaller quantity is possible to make as a paste. If you have almond paste made from almonds with the skin, not peeled one, so also fine, just the color will be slightly different. So, and we need white chocolate and coconut butter. White chocolate and coconut butter, I have them here also in the oven on a 45 degrees, standing from the beginning of our class, so they are completely melted. Once again, you can use a microwave in 30-second impulses to do the same. Our next task, now it's warm, now our next task is temper it. Chocolate in giandujas, it's very important for it to be tempered. So we are just going to use a table for tempering it. It's a very small amount. I'm making half of the recipe that you have, so I'm using tabling method. The same way like we will do with just the chocolate. I'm pouring my mixture of chocolate and cocoa butter on the table, and I'm starting to gently spread it on the table to let it cool down and obtain right crystal structure. This chocolate right now will be much more liquid than a regular chocolate because of a high content of cocoa butter in it. And yeah, as is normal, you just have to be more careful with it when you're working. So we need to go to 26.5 degrees. Or we went a bit lower, 25.6, which is absolutely fine. It's not a problem, but as you can see, it goes really fast on the table, and of course it is a very small quantity. So now I quickly need to put it back into our bowl. So I'm dividing it into very small portions and scraping it back to the bowl. Make sure to clean your spatula because we need whole amount. We need to follow recipe. So now my chocolate and cocoa butter is tempered. You can check its temper, how good it was tempered. So take just knife solutions that we did before, or just a tiny bit of a chocolate here on a cold part of the table, and observe when it will start giving first signs of crystallization. Since I had some chocolate in the bowl that was still warm, just a little bit, and also my bowl was standing in the oven for a long time, so it also, even though it's plastic, but it's pretty thick plastic, it still remains some warmness in it. So temperature raised to 31 when I get it back, which is perfectly fine for me. It just means that I won't have to heat it up again with a heat gun or hair dryer. For white chocolate, it takes longer time than for dark chocolate is to show signs of crystallization, so it still should not take too long. Look at it under angle and look for some mattness going on. So I can already see that it's starting to get matte, which means that my tempering was successful. And now I can add my coconut paste and my almond paste. So for almond paste, as you see in the recipe, you can combine almond paste, chocolate and cocoa butter, warm them all up together, and then crystallize them all together. I did only with the chocolate and cocoa butter. You can do it already with almond paste. It's not a problem at all. But with coconut, okay, so it's already been crystallized, is firm, so everything is fine. But with coconut paste, if I will allow it to melt, then it's gonna take really long time for it to set again, because crystallizing period for coconut butter, coconut oil, is longer than for cocoa butter or cocoa oil. That's why I don't want to melt it. So that's why I will be adding it only when my mixture is already tempered. First of all, I need to add my almond paste. As I'm doing half of the recipe, I'm just gonna need 25 grams. When I started to work at this recipe, I did gianduja, this particular gianduja with a milk chocolate, which was nice. I mean, color was kind of predictable, darker. Taste was nice, but I have some very strange situation. I wrote it in my Instagram some time ago. I had bag of milk chocolate 823 from Calibo. That something was wrong with it. I couldn't temper it. And I was thinking, okay, it might be just me doing some mistakes. And then I did it over and over again. And chocolate was just untempered, no matter what I do. And then I figured out that it must be some production mistake. And I cannot temper this chocolate. It just doesn't work. So I needed to add a lot of cocoa butter to temper it, which of course make it very liquid. So I have 75 grams here. Then I posted about it on my Instagram, and a couple of people said that they had the same problem with the chocolate. Sometimes it's some mistake in a in a factory, so chocolate cannot be tempered. But the thing is that I got 5 bags of milk chocolate, so 12.5 kilos. And none of them can be tempered. I already opened all of them. No, one I haven't opened. And I got them as a one batch, so it's like they come from one batch. And I don't know what to do with it. It's just, and I kind of forgot about it, or I thought it was just one bag that had a problem, and I used another bag, and I did this janduja, and it wasn't, I couldn't make it temper. Everything was melting, and it was a disaster. So I still have this 12 kilos of chocolate that cannot be tempered, which is great. Now I added my coconut paste. I have 70 grams in here. I already weighed it. And I'm just mixing it. And the thing is not to keep our coconut paste as this powder, not to let it melt. So it is uniform, but it has these particles of coconut, which is nice. It will give extra texture for us, so we can enjoy crunchiness, because of course janduja will remain crunchy, and on top of it we can enjoy some parts of coconut, because this recipe is like 100% oriented toward coconut. Okay, and now we are gonna move towards enrobing, and we are gonna start enrobing with our janduja. It's gonna be first layer for enrobing of coconut ganache. So doesn't matter if you did your coconut ganache, formed it by hand, or did it in the mold. Doesn't matter. You applied it exactly the same way. You have your table, you have parchment paper, and here it is. We have a parchment paper. You can put it on a baking tray like I have here, if you will have to remove it, or you can place it already on your table if you're planning not to remove it right away, you're planning to work with it here. For enrobing, bad thing in my experience will be to do it with the bare hands without gloves. With the gloves, chocolate will be sticking a bit too much. So it's up to you guys. If you want to use gloves, it's perfectly fine. It, on my experience, will be a bit more difficult. If you want to do it with bare hands, also possible. Just make sure that your hands are absolutely clean, that you wash them with the soap and hot water, and then you clean them with a hand sanitizer, so your hands are clean. This is what I'm gonna do right now. Actually, for janduja, we're gonna use gloves. Sorry about that. Yeah, so bare hands or wearing gloves, up to you guys. Both methods are acceptable. I'm gonna take fresh pair of gloves. Very good. Use this black nitrile gloves. They're very I love working in them. They're very nice and very durable, but they don't have like a powder inside like other gloves have, so sometimes it is a bit challenging to take them on. So here I applied a little bit of my gianduja just to see how it will behave. It won't behave the same as chocolate. It will take a longer time for it to crystallize. I can promise you that. Yeah, it's just the way it is. And we are probably gonna use to help it to crystallize a bit faster. We're gonna use another piece of stone plate, and we're gonna place them right here. Because of her two fats combined in here, it does take for it longer time to be formed. Okay, so I need my whiskies. So what we need to do, we need to apply little bit of gianduja here and start enrobing our truffle in gianduja. If you want to have a thicker layer of this crunched gianduja, you can enrobe it twice. If you want to have thinner layer of gianduja, then you will enrobe it once and then enrobe it one more time in just a regular chocolate. Usually all the truffles require at least 2 enrobings. It's a truffles that are hand formed. Truffles that already has a mold, a shell around it, that we did use in the mold, don't require 2 layers of enrobing on top of it. When you're enrobing, make sure that you won't apply too thick layer of whatever you're applying. You better do it twice in a thinner layers than to do it once in a thick layer, because if your layer is thick, then it will be dripping down and it's gonna form a skirt around your bonbon. And if you wanted to keep them nice and round, we want to have thin layers, so it will be still dripping and being flat on the bottom where we put it on, but it won't be at least as much visible. So this is what comes to coconut gianduja. Of course, I'm not going to be doing a lot. I'm going to be doing just enough, just a couple of bonbons, just enough for you to see what we are doing and how we are doing it. So if you want me to make some extra, just let me know. Otherwise, I'm doing just a couple of pieces each, just enough for us to see how it is working. So I'm gonna very, very carefully transfer it to the fridge to help it to set a bit quicker. So very, very carefully. Now we are gonna start forming the rest of our ganaches. So I have already some of them done. So we will be just enrobing them, and of course we are gonna do a couple of them together. If we will look at our ganaches that we did earlier today, they are already, as you can see, crystallizing, so they're getting matte and, as you can see, getting firm. But still, for a hand forming, it's not enough. We need to give them 12 hours. So that's why I have some that I did before, before class. I'm just looking at my chocolate, how it's doing. I think seems like I need to warm it up. It's still, as you can see, crystallizing. So to not to temper it again, I will apply hot air to the surface of it. And mix. So when your chocolate is getting thick, it's either crystallizing because of a cold temperature, so it's going its natural way, or if you have keeping it on a stable temperature, it can start over crystallizing. So too many of crystals of stable form are starting to form, and therefore all the chocolate is getting too thick. And way to save it is to apply heat and just on the surface. So we are melting very surface of our chocolate, so of course it's losing its temper, but since we have a lot of chocolate underneath that is still tempered and now we're starting to mix, so this melted chocolate helps to dissolve a little bit stable crystals and to obtain overall nice tempered chocolate. But be careful here not to go over 33 or 34 degrees overall temperature. It depends on how strong is your heat gun. It depends how much time you can apply heat on, because some of the mine is not very strong, but there are some, because mine is quite old one, but modern models can produce 600 degrees and they're doing it right away. So of course if you're applying 600 degrees heat on top of the surface of your chocolate, then you need to do it just for a couple of seconds, no more than that. So chocolate is liquid again, and I'm just gonna place it here on a warm surface, so it will help me to maintain it in temper. So what I was saying, ganaches that we did today needs 12 hours to stabilize, so we cannot enrobe them, or we cannot form and enrobe them right now. That's why I prepared some of the ganaches before class. Here I have the same pineapple and door blue. So this is the ones that we just did today. You see, it's still glossy. It's not moving a lot, but it's still glossy, so it will be absolutely impossible to enrobe it or form it. And here is the one that I used before, so it's older than 12 hours, honestly, but within 12 hours it's gonna look like that as well, so matte and firm. And we are gonna use this one, old one, to make a couple of truffles. For enrobing, for forming our truffles, I'm sorry that I am not, I'm misplacing words. We need a scale. A size of a truffle, which is for me is good, is 10 to 12 grams. So try to make all your truffles in the same size like we have here. They're pretty much the same. I'm usually going for 11 grams. It's like difference is just 1-2 grams, but actually it's quite visible. Here I have the one that is 12 grams, this one, and one that is 10 grams, this one. You see what a huge difference it makes. So if you want all your bonbons to be same, nice, round, and have the same appearance, weigh your ganache before you will start forming it. I know it takes quite a long time, but you can always choose a molding method. It's just extra option that I thought will be nice to share in the class. So our ganache is very, very firm, as you can see. My hands are clean. I'm putting it on a scale. It's 10 grams. I will add a bit extra. Almost 12. Okay, 11 grams. And now I'm starting to form a ball from it. Apply a little bit of pressure, but not too much. Once again, you can do it in the gloves, but with bare hands it is easier to do. Now we have truffle, and place it on a parchment paper. It is important when your hand forming your truffles, it is important to wipe your hands clean before every single truffle. Because if you won't do it, ganache that was left on your hands from a previous truffle, this ganache has already melted, of course, because of the heat from your hands, and it will be sticking to new ganache, and you will have your ganache look like a porcupine, like a small porcupine. It will have a lot of small spikes on it. So you cannot do it for a real long time because your hands are warm and it will start melting your ganache. So try to do it as fast as possible and try to make them as round as possible. If you cannot make them perfectly round from a first attempt, then just form them in a scoop or a ball and leave them alone. Let them sit for some time, and after they set just a little bit, you can return to them and give them more of a round shape. What else? Yeah, what I did last time, after I formed my ganache, I placed it all on a parchment paper, and then I had a higher tray, and then I covered this tray with plastic wrap, and I stored it overnight again. To give my ganache a chance to completely set as scoops, and also to give it a chance to air out the surface just a little bit. So it's not a necessary thing to do, but I felt like it will be a nice thing to do. Okay, I'm gonna do last one. I think we already seen it all. Unless you want me to make more, then I will stop here, not waste your time. Okay. And we do it with every single ganache that we did today. So as I mentioned, every single ganache can be piped into chocolate half spheres and did with a molten method, or it can be hand formed. All right, what's next in our program? We are gonna be done pretty quickly, guys, or pretty soon. So I think I will do 4 hours as I promised. Okay, yes, so we have truffles that we just did, we just fixed. We had the ones that I did before, and now we are gonna enrobe them and do some decorations. Once this that we just put gianduja on is set, cold temperatures helped us. It doesn't look pretty, so you can do it second time. Sometimes truffles, if you apply a thin layer, as we are doing now, sometimes it can take 3 to 4 enrobings, which is, I mean, it's perfectly fine. Just make sure that your layer of chocolate won't get too thick. Okay, let's start enrobing. Also, one of the reasons why I used seeding method and why I'm keeping my chocolate in the bowl right now is that melting kettle, the one here, of course it will maintain our chocolate in a working temperature as long as we work with it. But since it's keeping a steady temperature, over crystallization is starting, one that we just talked about. And over crystallized chocolate has a tendency to crack on the surface of the truffles. So couple of things to avoid. If you have done truffles before, at least I had problems that they were cracking. Couple of things to avoid it. First, don't use chocolate from the melter because why it's cracking? Because chocolate, when it's setting, it is contracting, and that's why it's cracking. When applied to the mold, it's just getting smaller, contracting, and then we can just easily take it out of the mold. When with the truffles, it's also getting smaller, contracting, and but there's no way to go for it because there is a feeling that it's wrapped around, and that's why it's starting to crack. So to avoid it, first, make sure that your fillings before you enrobe them are at the room temperature. Don't use a chocolate melter. Better use your chocolate in the bowl and help to maintain a working temperature with a heat gun like we just did a couple of minutes ago. Third thing, apply a couple of layers. Apply one layer of enrobing, let it set over like 20 minutes, then apply second one. Apply thin layer because thicker layer you apply, more pressure it will get, more chances it has of cracking. So apply thin layer and do it twice, 3 times if necessary. Yes. Okay, we are gonna continue with our coconut gianduja, and I will also put those truffles in just coconut flakes. For this task I will need gloves. This type of truffles, hand formed truffles, you cannot use fork to enrobe them because ganache will be simply stuck to fork and it will be a disaster. With the little ones like that, you can actually use fork, special fork for truffles, like this one or that one. But I still prefer hand deepened method. Okay, we have gloves, we have chocolates. our first layer of gianduja has set, and now I'm just applying some of the chocolate that is tempered, and I'm starting to roll it in the chocolate just like that. I need chocolate to form a uniform layer around bonbon surface, so I want to have a pretty thin layer, and then I'm just dropping it to coconut and covering it with the coconut flakes. Okay. Also, if you want a smaller layer, you can just apply chocolate just like that. It will give you even smaller layer on top of it. So since it is already third layer of a coverage on this ganache, because we have our shells that we molded, then we have our coconut gianduja, which is also stable filling. It is fat-based filling, so it is very stable, extremely long shelf life. And now we're applying just a little bit of chocolate to protect it even more, and putting it into coconut. And just leave it to rest in here. So it is indeed very, very, very simple. Okay, our next one. What then I want to do the next one? Next one I wanted to do with cocoa powder. Exactly the same, but we are taking just brown, just the chocolate ones without gianduja. Applying little bit of chocolate, mostly to cover if there is any holes in a connection, and putting it in a cocoa powder. The same one. And the same one. If we want to, okay, that's fine. And another one. So we can just leave them like that in cocoa powder, or we can make them look more like coconuts, and we will wait for them to get set, and after that we're gonna do some simple manipulation to make them look more like more like coconuts. So here they are, leaving them to rest in there. Okay, what's next? Next it will be a couple of like classic ways how to. It's just a bowl of ganache that we did. We're putting it on hand, applying some chocolate, and now we're just starting to roll it like that. Rolling it on a hand like that allows us to make this beautiful those like marks on top of it, like lines on top of it. So this is just the first layer. So I want to have a full coverage, and I want to have not a very thick layer of the chocolate. So I don't want, it still will be dripping, it's still gonna form a small like leg underneath, but I want to have as less as possible. I usually hold my glove like that to create more of a flat surface, because of course my hand palm is not completely flat. So that's why I hold my glove. Another one. Oop. Make sure when you're enrobing your bonbons to place them, well, maybe this is a bit too far away from each other, but place them in a distance from each other, because they are gonna, chocolate that we just applied is gonna start crystallizing. And if we want to avoid any kind of blooming on the surface or white lines on the surface, we need to make sure that this chocolate is going to crystallize very quickly. And if chocolates, these truffles, are standing too close to each other, like right next to each other, then they're going to exchange heat, because we still have our chocolate at 31, 32 degrees, so it still has heat. And they're going to start exchanging heat and slowing each other's cooling down process, and therefore they might end with white lines on top of it, fat blooming on top of it. So I'm just gonna do a couple of them. We have different ways how to approach their design afterwards. So I'm gonna be doing this for maybe like 5 more minutes. Oi! Well, this also happens. Keep an eye on your chocolate so it won't get too cold and won't start setting up in a ball, because if you're gonna miss this moment, of course you will have to melt it again and temper it again. So we're just gonna give it a little bit of heat. Working with the wrong hand is it's not very easy. So let's keep going. Just a little bit of chocolate. I think this method, compared to classic method with fork, I think this method gives us thinner layer of a chocolate, which I like a lot. Also, it gives us more roundness, because with a classic method with fork, no matter how no matter how long you will tap your truffle, you will still have this chocolate skirt in the bottom. Well, we'll also have it, but not as much as you will have when dipping with a fork. Sorry about that, guys. I need to be more careful. So that's why this method, I mean, I understand that it might look a bit messy, and that it requires some time. And when I first did it, it took me forever. But now I'm actually with the practice, it's actually like everything with the practice is getting less and less time. So just don't put too much chocolate on your palm. Just enough to make a layer around your bonbons. Bonbons, truffles. Sorry, guys. It's hard to speak and do something at the same time. Focus on both, on talking and enrobing. Okay, a couple of more. And couple of more, and we will have, of course, to do a second layer. Okay, this is the last one. Also, second layer is absolutely necessary because truffles, as already mentioned a couple of times, it will form some sort of like small chocolate leg in a bottom where it's standing on a parchment paper. And first layer, usually it's gonna stick to parchment paper and it's gonna form a hole in the truffle. So let's see. The first one that we unrolled, yes, it's doing it. It's classical. So it's doing this small holes. That's why second layer is absolutely necessary. And here is how it looks like, first one that we did. And beauty of a dark chocolate that it has already crystallized and ready for second layer. I'm warming up chocolate just a slight bit, and we are gonna do second layer. So all of this enrobing methods and designs that I'm showing you, they're very simple and don't require a lot of time. And they can be, I don't assign them for any taste in particular. I think except of when we're gonna make them look like coconuts, then of course it goes best with a coconut filling, but the rest is it's up to you. So here we have our chocolate flakes that we did together, and I'm just gonna, it had a chance to crystallize a little bit, so it is a very, very thin pieces of chocolate, and we want them to make a bit smaller so they will be small enough to look nicely on truffles. And it had a chance to crystallize a little bit, so it's not as gentle anymore, but still it is melting on my fingers, as you can see. After 12 hours it will be more stable. So this is what we have right now. Of course, for final decoration for your truffles, you can use all sorts of flake, royal flakes, puffed rice, some freeze-dried powders, a lot of things that you can use, nuts, a lot of things. It's just a couple of suggestions that I'm sharing with you today. All right, let's do a second layer. I'm probably not gonna do all of them in the second layer. So the first one that we did, again applying some chocolate. You need to have enough of chocolate on your palm to begin with. Then you can add less when you already have some sitting. Also right now it's nice the temperature is not really cold in my kitchen, because when temperature is very, very cold, then chocolate start crystallizing right on your glove. Oh, I don't know, sorry, what's happening. Which presents problems. And then try to place it in the same spot as it was touching your baking paper first time. So you won't have two of these flat spots, you will just use one. too. Sweet. So of course, more careful you are, more finer lines and details you will have on your truffle. And I think it looks very, very beautiful when you have those lines on it. So when you're rolling it back to parchment paper to form these beautiful lines, try to go all the way from end of your palm all the way to fingers and then just drop it. It will make these very long lines all around your truffle. So okay, and couple of others. I'm gonna, after we apply second layer, with the dark chocolate, usually 2 layers on the robin is fine. After we applied second layer, I'm just dropping them in our chocolate crust and letting it to stick to our to our truffle. Like professional hazard, bonbons everywhere. Here, of course, in this method, we don't have to worry too much to have beautiful lines on it. They won't be visible anyway, so we just do it quickly. Like for instance, this didn't have crack in the bottom, so most of the time it happens, but sometimes you can avoid it. There's also things that I'm telling you today. Everything that I'm sharing, it's something that I learned on a personal experience. So maybe it won't be the case for some other people. Just all the things is just something, some conclusions that I made for myself while working with the truffles. Okay, so we're just gonna get 4 like that. Just one more time, and now I'm gonna show you some even more stranger method of how to enrope more truffles at one time. It is quite strange, but we are gonna do it together anyway. And after that, just just couple of small decorations, and we are done. We are gonna look at our fillings, ganaches, how they're doing, and then we are gonna talk about your questions. And that will be it. Of course, we're going to briefly talk about ingredients. Yes. So my chocolate is still tempered. I'm warming it up to maintain working temperature or right texture of it. And now I need just a cake ring, like that. Cake ring. Yeah. It is strange, guys. So cake ring. It is 18 centimeters in diameter. Just a regular plastic wrap. Putting it on a cake ring and making a surface even. Okay. Now I'm pouring some chocolate in it. And I'm taking 4 truffles, molded ones. It can be also hand formed ones, but then those hand formed ones has to have one layer of a cover of enrobing before we can do this. And then I'm just starting to roll around. And the thing here is that chocolate will start crystallizing inside this strange contraption, and it will eventually uniform a super smooth and round surface of a truffles, and it's also gonna give some interesting texture of the surface. Make sure that you don't have like some pieces of chocolate like I have here, just 2 pieces of a chocolate that has been crystallized. So when you will see that your chocolate is starting to crystallize, and then you will have to start moving it really, really fast. That's why you cannot do it with just a pure ganache that you haven't enrobed in chocolate yet, because this ganache will be basically smashed, because you're applying a lot of friction and pressure. So it can be, of course, more than 4 in here. So chocolate is crystallizing. Slowly but surely. And give it one more try. So it looks like that. If you're gonna do it a bit longer, it will actually completely crystallize inside this cake ring, and you will have absolutely perfect round truffles. There is no lag underneath at all. So if you're gonna do it a bit longer, the small spikes will be evened out, and they will be more flat on their surface, and the advantage is that you can do more at one time, and you can make them absolutely round. Yeah. Okay, last very last thing, it's one decoration with a piping bag, like super simple one, guys. You might actually know how to do it, but I still gonna do it with you. So I want I will use scissors to make a clean cut on the edge of my parchment paper. And I'm gonna form a cornet. So it's just basically a cone. A cone that is absolutely closed in the top. Yeah. So actually only cornet allows us to make those nice, very fine stripes with the chocolate. Let us see if we have chocolate that is liquid, even liquid enough to do it. So of course, advantage of a melting kettle will be not using a heat gun all the time to warm up a chocolate, but it will also present the risk of our truffle surface cracking a bit more than it should. So I put just a little bit of chocolate in my cornet. I'm gonna make it easier for me to use. Of course, if you need to decorate a lot of truffles, you put more chocolate. You make a large cornet. You do a small opening, and you, in a confident move, you start pressing on the cornet and putting lines of the chocolate on top of your truffles. And you can decorate it with something on top, for example, cocoa nibs. Just throw some and they're gonna stick to your two freshly piped stripes. And one I'm gonna leave without cocoa nibs so we can see stripes. Yeah. One more thing is to do this coconut type of look. For do coconut-like look on your truffles, you need to have brush, like a steel brush. Well, mine is very big. You don't need it is as big like that. So you have your truffles in a cocoa powder, and then with the help of steel brush, of course steel brush has to be cleaned and sanitized, you're starting to make scratches on the surface going in one direction. So choose which side will be top of your coconut, so to say, and make all scratches in one direction. So it's gonna look like that. So there is no danger here to scrape all the way to the ganache, which of course won't be a good thing, because we have a pretty good shell, because we molded this truffle, so we don't have to worry about it. So it looks like that. And to make it look even more like coconut, we are gonna do 3 holes on top of it. Use some metal instruments, some metal stick. I have this one. Warm it up. And make on top of it 3 holes. Don't make them too deep because you don't want to make holes all the way to ganache. Ganache cannot be exposed. Make them just deep enough so it will look like a coconut. Yep. This is ready. Here's our truffles that we enrobed in a coconut. I'm taking them out of coconut paste, and I'm gonna do like that to have less coconut flakes on top and to give them more of a round form. So if you of course use white chocolate here, you won't have black surface underneath it, but I think it looks, even like that, it looks pretty nice. I actually like it. So okay guys, yes, we are gonna do it in 4 hours definitely, maybe even shorter. Now I'm gonna quickly go through last part of our PDF, and it's role of the main ingredients in the ganache, so we will have hopefully better understanding of what stands for what in our ganache. And ganache, it's a mixture of it's emulsion between liquids and fat. Liquids are represented by cream, fruit purees, and any kind of liquid-based ingredients. Fat is represented by chocolate, cocoa butter, and dairy fat and butter, dairy fat and cream. So we use cream when we want to have more creamy taste in our ganache. We use fruit purees to give a fruit taste to our ganache. We use chocolate, as we talked about. Chocolate is responsible for contributing to taste and texture. So we already talked about why we use certain fluidity chocolates and certain type of chocolates in the ganaches. Cocoa butter, as we already talked today, it's most important element in actually making your ganache firm. Especially it's important with the truffles. So cocoa butter is in the chocolate, and we add an extra cocoa butter for these purposes. And butter, we only had it in one recipe, but butter usually contributes to extra creaminess of your ganache. Sugars we use today. Sugars are used in our bonbons to extend the shelf life. There is, as we just talked about, the ganache consists of water and fat. So when you're emulsifying together water and fat, some of the water molecules are getting bonded with the fat molecules, so they're already staying bonded together. And some of the water molecules, they don't bond with fat molecules, so they are staying free. And it's called active water. Of course, free molecules of water are a great place for microorganisms to start growing. And that's why our shelf life is limited, because there is no way of avoiding this active water inside our ganache. So the way to fight active water and to prolong the shelf life of our ganaches is to use different types of sugar. All the sugars that we use today, it's natural sugars. I know that they might sound scary and like, what is this chemical components? They are not chemical components, it's a natural sugars. We use different sugars because every single sugar has its unique properties. All of them are affecting active water, and as you know, sugar is a natural it's a natural ingredient to preserve your food, and it comes to very different foods. So higher is the sugar level, longer is the shelf life. But of course, if we are going to put just a regular sucrose, a lot of sugar in our ganache, it's not going to taste good. And sucrose will also crystallize over the time, and then you will have your ganache candied, which of course doesn't taste nice. So that's why we are turning our eye to different types of sugars, and we are using glucose that counteract sucrose, because sucrose we have in our chocolate. So glucose counteracts sucrose and its in sucrose ability to crystallize. So whenever you have sucrose, you add glucose, and then this ganache will remain nice and soft over the long period of time. Also, glucose has a lower sweetness compared to usual sucrose, so there is something called sweetness index. Sweetness index of regular sucrose is 100. We all know how sweet is sugar, so a sweetness index for glucose is going to be 60 to 70. 60 to 70, so 40 to 30% less sweet than sucrose. Glucose can be presented as a syrup, liquid syrup, or it can be presented as atomized glucose. It looks like a white powder. I use both. In ganaches I usually use atomized glucose, so glucose powder. Also in my recipes I don't calculate water in the syrup, so if you have syrup, use the same amount as stated in the recipe as a glucose syrup. If you have atomized glucose, use the same amount as stated in the recipe in an atomized glucose. Next one is what we used was inverted sugar. Here it is. It always comes as syrup, more liquid, less liquid. Invert sugar is very sweet. It has a sweetness index of 130. It is hygroscopic, so it is used when ganaches are based or has a dark chocolate in it, because dark chocolate ganaches has a tendency to dry out with the time, and invert sugar makes sure that moisture in the ganache will remain, so it keeps the moisture inside bonbon or inside your ganache. Next sugar is dextrose. Dextrose is a grape sugar, and it's also just a white powder. It has a low sweetness index, 70 approximately, and is mostly used whenever there is a fruit component in your ganache, because it has ability to enhance taste of a fruit purees or any kind of fruit components that you have in your ganache. And the last sugar is sorbitol. Sorbitol is also a natural sugar. Can be found in many different fruits like melons, for instance, and also looks like a powder. Sorbitol has a low sweetness index around 60-70, and it's the most crucial for shelf life of your ganache, because it has amazing abilities to bind with these active water molecules, and it prolongs the shelf life greatly. So, as we already said, expected shelf life for truffles that we did today is 45-60 days. If you want to add sorbitol to those recipes, then expected shelf life is top 3 weeks. So sorbitol does make a lot of difference. If you are fine with a shorter shelf life and you don't want to use sorbitol, use dextrose instead of it. Yeah, that's it. If you have more questions about our ingredients, I will be happy to talk about it. Now I'm gonna just put our truffles on a stone plate so we can see them a bit closer, and I'm gonna start answering your questions, the ones that you have typed in chat. And if you have more, please go ahead and type more. Also, let's think I want to do is truffles, the last one we made. See how funny they look like porcupines, and I like adding glitter on top of it, so it's just a sparkling powder. It makes this nice surface stand out a bit more. So I'm taking just a soft brush, and I'm brushing just a little bit of a sparkling powder around my truffle. So I think it looks a bit more interesting with it. It can be, I'm using golden, of course it can be any kind. Golden, yellow, silver, whatever you like. If you like this idea at all. Okay, it's done. Now I'm just put them here. Our ganaches that we did today are getting more firm. It is getting definitely matte, and it's almost not moving now, so it's going the right way. When it comes to ganache that we haven't tempered, as you can see, it's not even completely matte yet, and it's still moving. So that's why this extra 5 minutes on tempering it probably a good idea. So here is our little ones with just light. Okay, I'm gonna show it to you in different ways. And a couple of last ones, and we're gonna look at them. All right, I think it just light is not catching up here. Wait. Okay, so here's what we did today. So rolling around, coconut flakes, stripes, and cocoa nips, just stripes, just a bold one, so to say. You can see it doesn't have, it still have a flat spot, but it's not too much. This one, golden porcupine, coconut, just cocoa powder, and chocolate shavings. Where to find Fleur de Cow? Germany not available. Ocoa will work, or Saint Domingue will work 70%. It's fine, as we talked about. It's fine. But where to find Fleur de Cow in Germany, I unfortunately cannot answer you. I just simply don't know. But either use different type of dark chocolate, or maybe write on official Cacao Berry website and ask them what contacts of a local distributor. Mexico and Tanzania I still have here. Perfect, it will work. Is in ganache, bonbons and truffles, do you use fresh or UHT cream? Will using fresh cream still permit you to have a long shelf life? I'm using fresh cream. It is pasteurized, but it's fresh cream. It has usually like 2 weeks of a shelf life in a fridge when it's unopened. So it is it's not a completely fresh cream, so it has been processed, so it's not coming directly from a cow. That one I will probably not use. But this one is fine. We don't have ultra pasteurized cream, because sometimes there is this ultra pasteurized cream that can be stored outside the fridge. Maybe we have it here. I never came across it, so I'm using just regular pasteurized cream. And the important thing is to bring it to boil before you will put in your ganache. Then it will, on my experience, been using it for 4 years now, nothing happening, so it should be fine. Yes, sour cherry, as we talked about. Is it possible to use dried cherry or freeze-dried cherry for more taste or longer shelf life? In a cherry marzipan recipe, yes, it's possible, but you cannot use freeze-dried cherry instead of cherry puree. We still need water, because if you're gonna have no liquid components in your ganache, you won't be able to make an emulsion. Then you will have to do some fat-based layer like gianduja. So for instance, if you're gonna make gianduja and add a freeze-dried cherry powder in it, then it's gonna be perfect. It's gonna taste great. If you want to add freeze-dried cherry in this particular recipe, then replace little bit of marzipan with powdered cherry. Yes. Do you have any experience freezing truffles or bonbons? Yes, I do it quite often. It's very simple. You take your truffles or bonbons, place them in one layer in a container. I usually use containers that are freezer safe, so they can be frozen. Usually it's plastic containers. I place my chocolates in one layer, I close the container tightly, transfer it to fridge for 24 hours or 1 day. So after 1 day, they're already adjusted to temperature of refrigerator. After that, I'm transferring them to freezer. Make sure that it is airtight. In a freezer, they can be stored for up to 3 months. What you cannot do is like to take it out from the freezer, unpack it, take one bonbon, and then put the rest back. I mean, you can do it like right away, but you cannot do it if you're gonna let it stand for 1 hour at the kitchen counter and then place it back to freezer. It doesn't work. You will have condensed water and all the things like that. So pack it down, place it in freezer. When you're gonna need it, take it out from the freezer, put it in the fridge for 24 hours for defrostation. After that, you can take it out from a fridge and it will be already ready for consumption. Shelf life in this case, for instance, you made your bonbon, it has a shelf life of 60 days. You put it in a freezer after 10 days since you made it. So it means that the shelf life will stop at this 10 days, like paused in 10 days. And after you take it out, defrost it again, it's gonna continue from this 10 days. So it's gonna have 50 days more, but you need to be careful with the defrostation. Yeah, pipe directly to the mold. This one we already talked about. You let set the ganache for 12 hours. Do you let set the round formed balls again before enrobing? Well, when you're using if you're gonna be molding your bonbons, then you cast your shells, you mold them, give it half an hour to set, then pipe your ganache, and then when you already have ganache, in the molds, you leave it for 12 hours, and after 12 hours you can merge halves and just work with them right away. Where to buy boron purees in Copenhagen area? Kondi. There is online shop. I'm gonna type. It's called Condi. Condi. Yeah, I buy it there. Yeah, guys, it's very. Thank you, the ones who stayed to the end with me. Thank you for spending your Saturday morning and afternoon with me, and I think we're all done. And if you don't have any more questions, then we can stop. Okay, one more question. I mean the hand rolled balls. Let's set for enrobing. Yeah, okay, I understand. Sorry. You can do them right away. If your ganache was standard for 12 hours, then you take it out, you roll your ganache, so you make your balls, then you can enrobe them right away. They don't have to set. I tried to give them 12 extra hours after they were rolled in the balls. It was nice. But then you need to store them responsibly for this 12 hours. So you need to cover them. You need to make sure that no moisture is coming in, the temperature is below 18 degrees. So it is not a necessary step, but I like because they were firmer and they aired out a little bit on the surface. So it was a bit easier for them to work with. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's it for now. I hope you enjoyed the class, and thank you who joined me today live, and hope guys you who will be watching our recording is gonna enjoy it as well. Yeah, so I think we don't have any more questions, so this is pretty much it, and have a great weekend too, and yeah, looking forward to see your work. Thank you too. I'm happy to hear that you liked it. Thank you. Yeah, hope you will take a try on these truffles, and then yeah, maybe share pictures with me or your impressions. I would really love to hear your feedback. Yeah. Thank you very much, and yeah, see you later. Bye bye.